All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you again, everyone, for joining today's PK-12 Network webinar on full steam ahead and supporting K-12 learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Megan Mafucci. I'm part of the resource development team at MIT Open Learning. And I just want to share a couple quick housekeeping notes before we get started today. So if you could just please take a moment to check and make sure that you have yourself on mute for the start of the presentation, and be sure to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. We invite you all to use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share questions or thoughts with our presenters and each other. A few of you had started to introduce yourself. We love that. Please say hi, let us know who's here. And finally, we will be recording today's presentation to share out following the webinar. So you should receive the recording when it's up and ready via email in the coming days. So with that, I am just going to hand it off to today's speakers, Dr. Claudia Urrea, Senior Associate Director of PK-12 at J-WEL, and Joe Diaz, the Program Coordinator for the MIT PK-12 Action Group. Thank you both.
Thank you, Megan. I was muted. I think we're gonna share screen. Joe will be handling the slides, but we are all presenting today. So thank you for inviting us and welcome everyone. We're going to talk about our more recent initiative called Full Steam Ahead. We don't want to take credit, but it's really a collaborative effort between and among many people at MIT. So our team today is Joe Diaz, our program coordinator, and also Kirky, DeLong, special projects, both at our Office of Open Learning and J-WEL and myself. So a little bit about Full Steam Ahead. So Full Steam Ahead is a collection of resources we have, and we'll dive into all of these areas in a bit, but it's a collection of resources that we have all put together and address both teaching and learning online. It was meant to be a rapid response to the need of resources and materials around the COVID-19 pandemic. And our idea was to curate resources in K-12, but really quickly K-12 extended to higher education and workforce learners as well. And we, for K-12, will dive deep into the weekly packages that we have been creating in our efforts going forward. Just a little bit about who the team, what we call an editorial board includes. So we have people at Open Learning and J-WEL, so the three of us, in addition to Kate Stringer, who is our communication contact with Open Learning and has been connecting us with, news and really following up with some of the educators and learners who have been using our materials. The MIT Seller Teacher Education Program. So we have Professor Eric Crawford, but three of his team members, and we also have Rohan and the rest of the team, Rohan and Ashley, who belong to the government office. And they have been an important part of the work, not just with an MIT, but also with connections to the local schools, which is part of what they lead anyway. Go ahead, Joe. And just to give you an idea of the contribution and the many groups that have been involved, we have here just this visual, just to express, we're an editorial board, but there have been contributions from many of the groups, starting with ours, but really connections to MIT as a whole. So here, we'll go through some of the details. Just go ahead. I'll want to spend a few minutes in the mission. So our mission was to create, we established the mission of creating and sharing high quality resources to facilitate digital and non-digital. So all of these materials are on the website, but they're not necessarily meant to be just for learning and teaching online, but it's really addressing some of the activities that could be done when you don't have necessarily digital materials or tools. And of course, part of what we do is what we know how to do well. So with STEAM activities that address instructional approaches. So we wanted to not only curate, but create materials in STEAM. And then we wanted to create also a forum that allowed people to have conversation about the way that they're using these materials. And the third part is really to inspire a very diverse group of global learners, that educators and parents, with challenges in distance learning. I think we have been, we really quickly created this resource, but we are very aware of the challenges that people have when it comes to learning at distance. What does it mean? What are the best ways to do it? What are resources you could, get? So part of what we have done is, in the conversation we have with educators, with parents, as we hear from different government agencies, local, national, and international, we have been, creating the materials we have been creating. So our mission is really come from our understanding of what is needed in our continuous conversations with learners, educators, and parents, but really extending what we know how to do well, starting with STEAM, but also with some of what we know about learning at distance. Joe, continue. I'm going to have here, part of what we want to do is not only speak about the full STEAM ahead, but give you sort of a deep dive into some of the areas. So Kirky is going to talk about some of this, and Joe will talk about some of this, and we'll have later a little bit of a breakout and discussion in smaller groups. So thank you. Go, Kirky.
So I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the resources. Actually, Joe and I are going to give you a quick overview. So what you can find on the site and how you might use them with your kids or as a teacher. So we have a resource section that we've started, and it's just a start, curating MIT resources, things like Scratch, which is a graphical programming language. We tried to make sure that when we were curating the materials, that we tried to put them all in one place. So it was an easy easy way to find all the materials. So on the site, you can find things like a link to the Scratch resources, or a link to MIT's App Inventor, which is a visual programming language. The Edgerton Center, which does a lot of hands-on makey stuff. Or Blossoms, which are videos for high school students that foster critical thinking. So in the resource section, you can find these sorts of resources. It's just a start. We hope to add more resources as the summer goes on. Joe? In addition to that, we've also have a teaching and learning section and gaming section. In the gaming area, the learning with games, the Education Arcade team has curated a list of resources of games. They give you a little description of the game. These are all games that they have actually played that they thought had some value in problem solving or collaboration skills, or good academics in them. They also have started a podcast series. The first one is called Parenting, Gaming, and Constructionist Games. It's a new series, and they are also on the website. For teachers and other people who want to learn about transitioning, there are some webinars linked to the Teaching and Learning Lab, Teaching Systems Lab, Teaching Systems Lab. This video happens to be Justin Wright talking about transitioning to online learning. It was put out a couple weeks ago. Joe? Beyond the PK-12, the site expanded to include links to resources for higher education and workforce learning. For the higher education, there are links to MIT courses, edX courses, OpenCourseWare, MIT Educator, and the new MIT Open Learning Library. They also highlighted some of the first-year courses. There's a highlights to physics videos, physics demo videos, which are actually sort of fun to watch. There's stuff on programming and computational theory, game design, which a lot of kids love, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So they're all curated and easy to access. For the education and continuing education route for adults, there are lots of links to MIT resources that are open and free, like OCW and MIT-X, the MicroMasters program, which is a certificate-based program. There are also links to professional education programs. They're going to be doing about 50 workshops this summer. Sloan School of Management is also doing online education this summer, and there are links to their programs here. So there are lots of resources, links to resources on the site. Joe?
Self here. Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, great. So yes, thank you so much, Claudia and Kirky. What I'd like to talk about too is the weekly packages that we've been offering, well, on a weekly basis. And these focus more towards the K-12 audience. So in addition to the resources that were mentioned before, the focus initially was to think about how can we curate a lot of the information and experiences that already exist at MIT into an easily digestible package. Thinking that, oh, well, if we provide a directory, it should be easy to navigate, right? Well, as we discussed it more, we realized that this isn't really going to be enough. And what we decided to do as a larger group is to really focus on each week finding a theme and activities that could be coordinated and or packaged in such a way that a parent or a learner or an educator could go to the site, see a very easily laid out set of activities that follow some sort of general theme for each week, and ideally be something that you could do at home, whether it's, again, on the computer or in a physical sense of something that you could print off from the computer or website or build on your own. So rather than talking about it too much, I just want to make sure that we show you what we've got. If you look on the right side of the screen, you should be able to see a weekly list of everything that we've done so far. We've currently made it to week 9, and week 10 is coming out next week, and that's why there's a question mark, but we'll see how that one turns out. What I'd like to do is just mostly show what this looks like in practice. So I'm actually going to stop this for a second, and hopefully you can still see my screen. All right. Oh, let me go back here for a sec. All right. Can everybody see this? Is my screen still visible? Great. So this is the website itself. Right now we're looking at the week 9 package. This one was created in conjunction between the Personal Robots group out of the Media Lab and MIT App Inventor, and they did a great job putting this together. So as you scroll down, you'll see that there's essentially an introduction video that kind of gives a preview of what a student, or sorry, a learner rather, can expect to see as they're coming into the site. There's a small overview. And then as you look at the way that they laid theirs out, basically we wanted to make sure that there were activities that were available across the K-12 spectrum. So activities that are available for younger learners all the way through the later years of high school. If you click on the different tabs, you can see that there's different activities that are appropriate for the different age groups. And for example, this week, the Personal Robots group focused on introductions to AI and ethics and thinking about how data privacy and how different algorithms work to give you recommendations. The App Inventor group focused on more of the older students, so looking at how you can actually build apps that use and or utilize machine learning and excuse me, artificial intelligence to make something that can classify images or sounds, or to even build a therapist bot that's replicating what the Eliza bot did back in the early part of the 20th century. So there's a whole bunch of different things here, and ideally for a parent or a learner or an educator, you could come to this, see that this is not exactly going to be ready-made for a classroom, but there's a whole bunch of different activities that can be either adapted to be done on a one-on-one basis with a student, could be done in small groups with a group of students after it's been sort of looked at, and you can view the teacher guides. There's a whole bunch of materials here. And basically, ideally, this would be useful for somebody who's thinking about keeping their students entertained and active during this time that we're all not in school and not around each other. So I hope that this is somewhat useful. I'm going to go back to the slides here real quick. All right. So how does this look so far in terms of usage? Well, we've been, let's see, there we go. We've been pretty surprised and happy about the way it's gone over the last few weeks. We've had about 28,000 people come to the site in some way, shape, or form. We've had visitors from, what's it, 140 countries at least, I think is the number. And right now this graph sort of just shows like a frequency map for, you know, where they're coming from. So obviously it's very heavy on the United States, but we've been very pleasantly surprised to see folks from all over the world finding ways to interact with the site. In addition to just the analytics, we also have gotten some feedback from some parents and educators listing how the modules have been useful, that they've been easy to adapt. We have a student here who built his own inventing notebook, which was part of the activities of week 2, coming from the Lemelson MIT group. It's been really satisfying to see how some of these materials are being used. In this slide, oh yes, we also have from week 3, the Space Exploration Initiative. We had one student who decided to go through the science of space food, right? And thinking about like, what are the challenges that you have to think about when you're cooking, not only at home, but in a zero gravity environment. So there's a whole bunch of different things here, and they really run the gamut of whether it's something that you might think about as a computer-based activity or something you can do on paper and actually build physically. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is available right now for anybody to use. Obviously, this is not perfect. We built this very, very quickly, and we're hoping to make it better. So what needs improvement? Well, initially we thought about implementing a forum system so that users could, you know, share their questions, communicate with us, show us what they made. And admittedly, this has not been the most active of forums. We've been lucky to have some involvement, and we've tried out different strategies like hosting an Ask Me Anything, or encouraging students to show the instruments that they made so they can show the music that they are producing to other students. But overall, it's a whole nother task to monitor and create that community. And that's something that we need to do a better job of and figure out what's actually going to be more effective. Additionally, getting feedback is something that we need to also improve on. So we obviously have some analytics, and we've gotten some feedback from some parents, but for the most part, it's hard to know how all these materials are being used and where they can be improved for groups or audiences that maybe we haven't heard from. So this is something that we need to also improve on as we decide where this is going to go in the future. Lastly, but not least, we also need to think about localization and translation. So right now, most of the materials are, well, all the materials are available in English, and they primarily serve United States-based English practices. So if you're a native speaker or a native English speaker in the United States, you'll probably have no problem understanding most of the materials. But if you're coming from another region or another country and this is all in English, it might be more difficult. So we looked at thinking about how we can localize to different regions, whether it's in Spanish or Chinese or any other language. And we also have to think about not only the access from a language perspective, but also the access to the technology itself. Are these materials available to somebody who's in China who may not be able to access Google or YouTube? Are these available to a user in a more rural area that has a very thin access connection? There's a lot of things that need to be worked on, and we hope to also improve this in the future. So I'm going to go from there and pass it back to Claudia.
Thank you, Joe and Kirky. I think some of the things that I want to mention, you know, at the beginning, I mentioned an editorial board that is a group of us who have been more deeply involved, but with the collaboration of many people, and mention a little bit of how we got started. So when MIT announced closing of activities in K-12, so we run a number of programs in different groups, including our student clubs run K-12 programs at MIT. And the first thing we heard that was that those programs are going to be canceled on campus, and canceled even for those who were going to school. So we got this big community together. I think we had almost 70 people, both online and in person, having a conversation about how can we come together, how can we collaborate, how can we start preparing, anticipating that some of the summer programs that we have were going to get canceled as well. So I think some of that sort of community together and this idea of doing something for teachers and learners and addressing distance learning started there. And it was Professor Eric Kloffer who said, what can we do? How do we bring together materials? How do we create resources? So we had been trying to, through this effort, make it easy for different groups at MIT to contribute. So we meet with different groups, we help them structure, we are very flexible in the way that we ask them to produce activities, hopefully using some of what they already have and some of what they already do, creating a few things, curating, adding sort of an introductory video that helps people sort of navigate the materials. It's not meant to be activities that keep a learner busy for a whole week, but it really gives the students enough activities to engage. So we have seen, as Joe mentioned, kids using it. We have received requests from educators to download a package or to make the activities available certain format that allows their students to participate. So we have heard really good things, and we still need to do much more. One of the things is addressing connectivity so people can maybe download the packages and create a mirror. So we have lots of things to do, but we have come together, and we're really excited about you know, the community offering something beyond what the individual groups can offer. Hopefully these are resources that other programs, so I was looking at some of the questions and comments, hopefully other programs within MIT can use if they feel like their students might be able to benefit from using some of these materials, but they're also welcome to create and contribute to this list. But you know, beyond what Joe mentioned in terms of how we know we have to improve, a few weeks ago we asked ourselves the question: what happens beyond this initial phase that was sort of an immediate response, especially around K-12 where we have the weekly packages? And we realized that we needed to do much more than count, you know, how many visits and have the sort of the individual stories. So again, we engage the MIT community in thinking about how do we go beyond, how do we go deeper? And we're working right now in the idea of a summer pilot program. It would be offered to middle school students. That's a decision we made with a number of other groups, that this is where we felt we could make a difference rather than spreading too thin between age groups. We would like to work with local schools and local, you know, in the greater Boston area. So we have a outreach effort. We would like to reach learners that could benefit. I think some of the comments that I already saw had to do with how we have concerns for what we see in remote learning, how we have concerns for areas where kids are falling behind. We also, you know that kids that were really motivated and, you know, we're high achievers in the face-to-face format are not necessarily engaging with whatever we call remote. And I think that there's so many ways we can describe what is going on that we all name remote learning. So we're trying to have conversations with some of the schools that we're working with in the local area to see what are the group of students that might be that might benefit from a summer experience. We've decided to do a couple of sessions that are 3-week long, and our aim is to reach up to 400 learners over those 2 sessions. The idea is to address, as I mentioned, some of the academics that have to do with, you know, kids falling behind in some of the areas, especially math. That we want to extend what we do and know how to do well from the MIT perspective that has to do with project-based learning and what we call minds and hands. So giving students agency, having them construct things that are meaningful and you know, where they can really bring their interest. But also adding the connection to their own interests. And by that, we were debating on, you know, the students have found and learning and all kids have found ways to connect to their friends using their own interests, like, you know, through Minecraft to Animal Crossing, to some of the games that they already do, or interest in pottery or cooking. So we're trying to add all of those elements into a program. There is an opportunity using and bringing our MIT students. we know that the students, not just at MIT, but beyond, have been trying to support this remote learning as well. And we had discussions among different groups at MIT and how we could work with our students from MIT and empower them, but also allow them to succeed as they work remotely with younger learners. So they will, the idea is that they will lead some of the project-based learning, but also do some of the tutoring and teach some of the other activities that we're trying to bring into the program. We're mindful of resources. I think some of you send us questions about what about tools, what about materials? So we are taking that into consideration. So what are the, we call them modules or packages or activities within those packages that we can facilitate and come up with a list of materials that we can put together as kids that will go home. The idea is that they can be offered at cost for those who can afford paying for them, but they will be also made available to those who cannot pay for free. And of course, use our materials. So all of these considerations we have gone through, and I think we have still, it's not just the three of us, it's some of the members of the community who are working together and thinking about what we can offer in the summer that really speaks for more deep engagement, to give us a better story and help us understand where we can succeed, given though MIT is an institution of higher education that has a really, really strong footprint in K-12. Kirky and Joe will speak about some of the details we have so far regarding this pilot program. And I think one of the reasons we want to offer some of the sort of conversation on what's still cooking and what's still really work in progress is that we're hoping that you can use some of these design principles to think about ways in which you could use these resources as you work locally with your schools and your kids and your community. So, Kirky, Joe.
Okay. Joe, there you go. So we are still in the design phase of this. So we're thinking about 4 hours of contact each day. We're thinking that Monday through Friday we would run Monday through Friday. Monday through Thursday would follow this sort of schedule, and then we do something slightly different on Fridays. Again, this is all in planning stages. So in the morning, we were thinking of doing fun activities, teach anything. They could learn a bit about cooking, they could go into Minecraft, Animal Crossings, pottery, those sorts of things. We have amazing MIT students who love to explore what their interests are and be able to share their interests. We also put in tutoring in the morning. So about 45 minutes of talking about math objectives and maybe science and how they might lead into things going on in the afternoon. But this would be the academic portion. We'd then have a break, and then the afternoons would be devoted mostly to module time, to those sorts of activities where the students are doing hands-on stuff. They're building something, they're exploring a concept. We think that in the afternoons, they would come in for a discussion to learn about what the modules are about. They could then stay connected, not stay connected, but always be able to connect with an MIT student if they had a question, and then wind up at the end of each day with some sort of group activity. We're still trying to design this, maybe building a kinetic sculpture that everybody does a piece and we put them all together at the end or something. It's still in the design phase. Joe? So as we're thinking about this, we're thinking about using some of the modules that are on Full Steam Ahead and some of our camp modules, things like, and possibly CubeSats and outer space, or how do you make music? How do you design instruments? Aerodynamics and rockets, so building their own bottle rocket and sending it up. So we're looking at it, breaking it down by weeks. So week 1 would be modules, week 2 would be modules also, And then week 3 would be design thinking. So the kids understand the process of design thinking and iteration. And then they get to design and build their own projects. Again, you have to bring in some academics to this and also include some things like programming with Scratch or microbits. We're thinking on Fridays, maybe we can find some wonderful guest speakers that would really encourage the students to sort of stretch outside of their comfort zone and try new things. Joe, did I forget anything?
No, I think that you did a really great job covering what we're thinking about. And I think it's also worth noting that just like everybody else in this situation, we're all trying to figure out what is possible and what can work. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible about our own design process as we go through this and think about what sort of experience we can offer to students who partake in the program. Normally, as some people might know, we've run summer programs in an in-person capacity, taking the principles of project-based learning and hands-on learning, and then really encouraging students to take a part in their education and make something of their own. Adapting this into an online remote learning format is something that we're all learning about, and we really hope that we can make something that's not only educational and engaging, but also just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I will add a few things. I think some of the, I mean, we want to address the academic part, not separated from the project-based learning activities. So we know, I mean, if we take math, so we know that kids are falling behind. We know that there's a need to bring some of that math skills, and we want to make it as fun as possible. But we also want to connect that to the different modules that Kirky and Joe were describing. So if they're doing some tutoring, we want to make sure that that tutoring is not just about, drill on that math concept, but we can make it fun. But if we can make connections between that tutoring and learning of a math concept with how we are bringing the modules and how we are connecting to project-based learning. So the learning is more applied, more contextualized, and is really, they use it not because, they learn it not because it might be needed someday, but they learn it because they could use it in a particular project. Maybe if we do a Venn diagram, it's not a complete overlap, but we're trying to make sure that at least some of the math concepts that we bring into the morning are part of what they are able to apply as they think about projects. So all of those are considerations for our design of the summer experience.
So I think at this point, didn't we want to maybe open it up for a couple of questions, just as a double check? And I apologize, I can't see the chat from my window.
That's okay. So we have a question from Dave about evaluating the summer camp pilot and its impact.
I mean, we haven't discussed that part yet. I mean, this is really work in progress. I think I can speak about our goal in previous summer camps that were face-to-face. Part of what we wanted to do was, one, understand how kids were learning those concepts. I think we'll be able to maybe do it in a more direct way since we have also an academic and tutoring. So I think understanding concepts is important, not just because there's tutoring around that concept, but because they're able to apply. So I think we ideally want to do that. We also want to understand the use of different tools. As you notice, there's Scratch, there's microbit. So we also want to understand their fluency with different technologies. So we're not really teaching Scratch, we're not teaching microbit, we're making them available for them to connect to different kinds of activities, but also make sure that they can use them to design their own projects. So that fluency with technology is important as well. And I think the development of different skills. So in previous camps, we have talked about sort of promoting iteration, like failing. So I think part of what we might want to understand here, and we don't know if all of this will be possible, but we'll do probably some of it. How, educators, but also the kids themselves understand how they're developing different skills, how they're able to fail, how they might ask for help or help others, how creative learning happens. So I think at least some of these three different areas, one that has to do more with the academics, the other one with fluency with technologies, but also the development of particular skills that we are promoting and using as sort of framework for a type of activity like the one we're creating.
Actually, real quick, so Rohan, are you there? Are you on the call? I'm sorry, I can't see from
Hi.
you. Did you have a, sorry, I think you mentioned that you had a point that you wanted to add also to that?
Yeah, quickly to Dave's point about evaluating these programs, I think part of this also is, part of this pilot is also figuring out how do we evaluate these new forms of virtual summer opportunities. So as we're going about this, we would love help and assistance, and other parts of the Institute who maybe have expertise in this could also provide some input about how do we evaluate these new opportunities, which we're creating right now on the fly. As you can see, it's still a work in progress. But that's a great question. We do need to be thinking about how do we evaluate and move forward for our next iterations from this pilot.
Yes, Rohan, and I think that I see Rohan does a lot of the conversation with local teachers and schools. So I feel like this is not just our success, but I think part of what we want to do in these conversations with teachers and schools is understand the gaps, and if those are part of the drive and the sort of the input we take into designing a summer program, I think we will have to think about how we assess that success. This is, and I clarified in the chat that this is a remote experience. So every kid will be at home. And so we'll be at home, and our students from MIT will be at home. So this is pretty much a remote experience. So could we, could this inform some of what happens in the future? It's not going to address everything, but it will give us ideas for maybe a phase 3 on how MIT might support what happens in schools starting in the fall.
Okay, so I want to just make sure that we're looking at the time. Did we want to move into the next section? Okay, great. So, so Megan, I'm going to need your help with this. So what we'd like to do next is a small breakout session. So just in case everybody here isn't as Zoom heavy as we are, what we'd like to do right now is break out into a few different rooms to see how different folks feel in a discussion-based way about these questions, so that we can get some of your insights and your feedback and discuss maybe on a more personal basis. So the 3 questions that we'd like to get into are: 1, how can we better support those who engage with these kinds of activities, and who are those different communities who could also benefit from them? Number 2 is, what is one thing you want to share from your experience about learning at distance? So whether you call it remote learning or online learning, everybody at this point has had some sort of experience with that, especially after the last couple months. So what's one thing that you'd like to share? And lastly, what sort of feedback do you have for us so far? You've heard a little bit about the things that we've been testing and implementing for the last couple months, some ideas about what we want to do in the future. What can you tell us about how you feel about it? Again, there have been some good questions in the chat, but what else can you share with us? Also, I believe that we originally had planned for 6 rooms, but I think that, right now, maybe, do we want to just go with, is it 4 or 5? What do you think, Claudia and Megan?
Yeah, we can go with about 4 or 5. I have 5 right now.
Okay.
One of the things that, if the conversations are really, if you get into deep conversations, you don't have to address the 3 questions. We thought it would be nice to hear from some of you about what's happening with learning, learning at distance from your particular experience of your home, your child, or if you're an educator, what happens if you're part of the MIT community, what inputs you have for us would be good to have, but you could pick one of the questions and dive deep into that.
Thank you. Okay, so just about ready?
Yes, and just with an eye to time, I'm going to give us 10 minutes in our rooms.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. See you all soon. And that was a good conversation. I hope that you all have the
Yes,
same.
good conversation. I think if people want to maybe ask a question of summarize some of the discussion that happened during the conversations, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, feel free to just unmute yourselves and join the conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll start. So social emotional needs of the students came up in our conversation, and the need to make the students feel like they exist, making them really with live sessions engage, and so that they're not feeling isolated. Another idea that came up was to be culturally conscious. Families are at home, and how can we bring not only the student but the families into the education, thinking about their learning experiences, what they saw growing up, and what images bring up their childhood, and just engaging the families also in deeper learning experiences.
Yeah, we do have resources. I mentioned like the STEAM camps and all of the modules that we have, because some of them do not require very sophisticated technologies or materials. So maybe, Megan, we can give you access to some of those links for us to follow up with ideas. There are questions about Scratch Junior. I mentioned the idea of, and when we make the request, the idea, the need of Scratch Junior to run in different devices. And we know that something exists that is maybe licensed to the Scratch team that we're gonna try to ask. There was also the question of like laptops and particular devices because Rohan is here, I will mention it as, are we asking families whether they have certain technologies to see if we could address some of those as part of the sort of resources we have to make available for some of the students to participate. And maybe you can say a few things about that.
Yeah, so this was one of the points in our conversation as well from Laura and Dave, and I think this is on everyone's mind. And as part of this pilot for this summer, we are very purposely looking to partner with community schools and community partners in the Boston area who have the flexibility and ability to help us with those technology needs during this pilot session, so that not only are we recruiting and working with students who could benefit the most from this opportunity, but we're also being very cognizant about some of those students who might need those opportunities might not have the technology. So we're trying to make sure from the get-go, students' technology needs and capacity to do so, to learn along these 3 week camps, are able to do so right from the get-go.
Hey, Rohan, quick question around that. Would we be open if we had contacts with some of the big corporations in the greater Boston area, and we could reach out to them, say, any laptops you're not using, could you give to us? Would we be open to that if we could harness that quickly?
I think we would need to think about what the implications are, but I think if the community comes together, I feel like in general, beyond this summer and beyond everything, one thing that we have learned from this crisis is that we have to learn to work together. So I feel like we have to come and work together to, solve so many problems. So I will welcome that as an option. Maybe a particular district could work with the industry to get those machines. I will be concerned of the maintenance and the sort of IT work that is behind. So if they can offer that as well, that would be ideal. So that is a great, and I before I forget, I think when it comes to social emotional learning, there's some sessions that Peter Sengin Mehta had offered for free, and I think the recordings are there. We also have, as part of the observation package, some observation of the self that has some meditation. So if people want to look at those resources as well, they're there. Because as we understand the needs, I think the social emotional learning aspect of education becoming a responsibility of everyone, not just so much the school, but is a shared responsibility that I feel like families as well as learners have to address. I think that's one of the areas that we understand is a big need, not just in the US, but all over the world. And, early childhood being another area of concern. So we're mindful of those. So we have those resources as well for Megan to come back with a list of materials and things that will be useful for this group.
Great. Well, I think we're just about at time now. I want to thank you all again for tuning in today, and another thanks to today's presenters, Claudia, Joe, as well as Kirky. Thanks so
Rohan.
much for your time. Rohan, of course, for facilitating and joining. Really appreciate all of your time and thoughts, and we encourage you to continue sharing your questions and ideas and feedback with us to pk12network@mit.edu. That's the email address we'll send around the recording of today's discussion, as well as some of those additional resources that Claudia and the team were mentioning. So keep an eye out for that, and please continue to be in touch with us as we all figure this out together.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.